الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان.
Assalamu alaikum, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Revelation Experience. Today we are charging forward with the early Meccan surahs. I hope this has been helpful for you, just reading it in this order. In the last few surahs we talked about, let me take a look at my list. We did Surah Al-Fajr, Surah Al-Duha. We talked about relationship building, longing for Allah, and then that was followed by Surah Al-Insha'Allah, talking about how we're going to be busy in the daytime, but with every hardship there is ease. And at the end of the day, after a busy day, we have to turn back to Allah in loving desire to be close to Him, right? So we have this idea of relationship building, so important. The relationship is trumping everything else, right? Once you have the relationship, then being obedient is like a natural desire for you. It's not this unwilling obedience. And that's something that I always found frustrating about the way people define Islam as submission to Allah, because submission tends to have all this negative connotation. When you think of submission, you think of like a slave submitting to a master, right? You think of like the stormtroopers submitting to Darth Vader. There's like this very unpleasant kind of vibe going on here. Islam is about willful submission. Right? None of us submit to Allah if we don't have to, right? It's out of a willful desire to be like, look, I want you to show me the way. I am putting my head on the ground because you're the one who tells me what to do. I will do whatever you want me to do. I'm just here to just fulfill your every wish and command. That's willful submission, which is very different than the submission that I tend to think of with a word, which is like, oh, geez, here he comes. All right, everyone stand up, get in line, at attention. And then the drill sergeant comes through, right? That's not the submission that Islam is talking about. We're talking about a beautiful, peaceful submission here. And so that's what Allah is creating, is this idea of relationship, this idea of longing, because Allah is longing for us also, our company. So we talked about time management. We're hinting at time management. And now we're getting to an incredibly important surah in the Qur'an, Surah Al-Asr. And most of you are familiar with this surah, I would imagine. Many of you perhaps have it memorized. It is an interesting surah for many reasons. It is called by time, right? And what's fascinating about it is that the opening verses say, by time man is at a loss. Let's listen to the full surah real quickly.
وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ.
So it begins by saying, by time, by the passage of time as a witness, humanity is in a constant state of failure. That's the translation that I'm reading right here, right? By time, man is at loss. That's how I think of it when I'm reciting it. And what's so ironic about this surah is that because it's such a short surah, we all tend to say it a lot because we want to get through the salah quickly, right? Allahu Akbar. So we use this surah as a means to rush through salah. Okay, maybe I'm divulging too much of my own personal experience here, but I think I'm not alone in this. Raise your hand if you're with me on that. Okay, see, look at all the hands being raised right now, right? So this is not, I hope, not my own, I'm not the only person experiencing this. But we've gone through this where we're trying to rush through salah, right? We're trying to rush that phone call. Hey, mom, yeah, how are you doing? Okay, yeah, great. Okay, I got to go, bye. Right? How does that make the other person feel on the other end of the phone? In the same way, when we rush salah, we're not establishing a relationship. We're not building on our foundations. We're not doing any of that. And if anything, we're insulting the person on the other end of the line. And so Allah is saying, by time man is at a loss, and yet we're using this very surah, repeating these very lines to further our loss by time. So I always found that ironic. So anyway, let's dive into this surah. And I want to just say one thing. If I haven't said it before, and I'll say this multiple times again, all this stuff that I'm telling you when we're going through the Qur'an, very little of it is from my own knowledge bank or my own experience. I'm actually going through different tafsir of the Qur'an and just presenting to you just the general, most fundamental, basic overviews of every surah. And my primary source of this is a translation by Yahya Emrich's work on the Qur'an, the meaning of the Qur'an in kind of accessible English. I have told you guys before, I love this copy of the Quran. I find it the most accessible to read. I find the tafsir very easily to read. It's very well researched. And I'm a friend of Yahya Emrich's. I really believe in his intention and the sincerity with which he wrote it. Is it perfect? No. Is any translation perfect? No. So before, the translation warriors come and try to say, well, why did you read this and why did you read that? To each their own, as long as we're trying to do our best to get through the Qur'an. But the reason why I'm mentioning all this is because I just want to remind you all that this work that I'm bringing to you, it's not my effort. It's really the efforts of people like Yahya Emrich, who have spent much of their lives, decades, putting pen to paper, trying to understand the Qur'an, and then writing it all out so that they could share it with all of us. So I'm mentioning that just so that in your heart, you just have a place to just make dua for people like Yahya Emrich, who have devoted their lives to bringing this information to the rest of us. So that being said, I'm just going to read to you the introduction that Yahya Emrich has on this, because he does a very nice introduction, and I want you to get a taste of what his translation is like. So he begins Surah Al-Asr by saying, "This is one of the shortest yet most compelling chapters of the Qur'an. The passage of human history is filled with war, betrayal, suffering, and sorrow brought about by such human failings as greed, anger, depravity, and arrogance. Every nation and individual will experience loss at some point or another, and every achievement will pass away to dust. However, if a person has faith in something greater than himself and weathers the trials, knowing that no test is endless or without purpose, then he can transcend both earthly triumph and failure and gain a deep-seated tranquility that can help him detach his mind from the immediacy of the physical world. He can achieve the kind of inner strength and peace that come from wrestling with one's own mortality and realizing that we matter only to God." Okay, that's just half of the paragraph. But he is capturing basically the purpose of this book, this Qur'an. I mean, in a nutshell, for those of you who are able to follow along or weren't able to follow along, what is he saying here? He's saying that human history is just messy, is difficult. There have been wars, calamities, fires, pandemics, right? Influenza pandemics, all this kind of stuff. That's a hot topic right now. People have been ravaged, societies have been killed, there have been plagues, there have been horrible things that have happened in humanity. We cannot escape that, right? The purpose, and as we'll go through in the other Meccan surahs, this life was not designed to be some easy breeze, okay? So for those of you, for the kids out there who are listening, I'm just going to give you a quick kind of hard knocks lesson here. Life is unfair. It's going to be unpleasant. Seemingly unfair, I should say. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be difficult. A lot of you who are excited about getting married might end up getting divorced. A lot of you who can't wait to have children might never have children. And I'm not trying to sound doom and gloom, but this is just the reality of the situation. Life is difficult. And even though we feel that we've been such great Muslims, we deserve X, Y, and Z. No, it's just going to be messy and difficult. Some of us will have health issues. Some of us will have financial issues. Some of us are going to have relationship issues. It's just everyone gets dealt a certain hand, and you got to play your hand. And what Yahya Emrich is saying in this is that he's saying, as messy as life will be, the believer has something that the disbeliever does not have. And it is the key that makes life so beautiful. It's a key to I call the gift of revelation. He says, if a person has faith in something greater than himself and weathers the trials, knowing that no test is endless or without purpose, he can transcend both earthly triumph and failure and gain a deep-seated tranquility that can help him detach his mind from the immediacy of the physical world. It is possible. It is truly possible to be able to detach yourself from the suffering that you are going through. We see this in the story of Ibrahim alayhis salam, who, when the people were upset at him because he showed to them that idolatry was an errant way, they said, build a huge fire and throw Ibrahim alayhis salam into it. I mean, that's worse than the plague. That's worse than divorce. That's worse than not having children, being thrown into a fire while you're alive. And yet Allah says, fire be cool for Ibrahim. And like I said previously, Ibrahim said that was one of the most beautiful moments of his life, in that fire, because it was so cool and comforting. So we have in this story proof that for this prophet, Allah transformed what would seemingly to the observer be so difficult to something blissful for the believer, and that bliss came from the strength of his relationship with Allah. And so that's what Yahya Amrik is saying here in the beginning of this surah, is that the strength of our relationship can transform our experience. And so it's not that we're detached, like we don't have feelings. Yes, we will still feel suffering and pain and sorrow. We know even in the story of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he wept at the burial of his son Ibrahim. I'm sure he wept at the burial of all of his children. So sorrow you're going to feel, but the deep anguish and despair, we can free ourselves from that if we have this meaningful relationship with Allah, knowing that everything that happens to us comes with purpose and with meaning. So now Yahya Amrik ends his introduction to the surah by saying that the classical jurist Imam Ash-Shafi once remarked that if people spend their time pondering over the lessons of this chapter, it would be enough for them to achieve deep understanding. The companions of the Prophet thought so highly of this chapter that it is said that when they would meet each other, they would not part until someone recited this chapter.
وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ.
Big chapter here. Only 3 verses, and yet it represents so much of the Quranic message. So, what does it say? By the passage of time, humanity is in a constant state of failure. Except, so all humanity is just kind of withering away, wasting their time, except who? Those who believe, aminu wa amilu salihat, those who do what's morally right, and teach each other to be truthful and persevering. So by time, we're all human beings, we're kind of drifting in our space, and we are all at a loss, all right? Except those who believe. We have to believe in Allah, but believing in Allah means that you have to do good deeds. You can't just believe without doing good deeds, because then you don't really believe in Allah. It would be oxymoronic, right? Because believing in Allah means that you believe in what He's asking you to do, and the foremost thing He's asking us to do is to take care of the people around us, right? Khidmat, so important in our deen. So taking care of people. And so that's why you always see aminu wa amilu salihat. You see that in every other surah almost, right? Those who believe and do good deeds. You rarely see aminu, those who believed and they were fine. They have to be doing the good deeds. That's like part of it, right? So those who believe and do good deeds. And then what do? They teach each other to be truthful and persevering. And what I really like about that translation is he didn't say patience, right? Because the surah ends with sabr. And a lot of times it's translated as patience. And I really get frustrated with that word patience. Because patience to me, I imagine someone with their hand kind of drumming against the desk like that. That's patience. Like you're just kind of putting up with something and just waiting for something to pass. Perseverance to me is being patient when you have something coming up in front of you and you're persevering with your task no matter how difficult it is. You're constantly persevering, pushing forward. No matter what the outcome might be, you are pushing forward, trying to make this thing happen. Perseverance is building an ark when people are laughing at you. Patience would be to just kind of fold up your arms and be like, I don't know what to do. These people are driving me crazy. I'm so tired of dealing with them, on the side of the ark. Perseverance, true sabr, is actually continuing to build the ark even though people are making fun of you. So it's an active process, sabr. And so that's what we're seeing in this surah. Allah is saying that we have to believe, do good deeds, and we have to remind each other about the truth, to be truthful and to persevere. Keep building what you're building. Keep raising your family. People are calling you crazy for the way you raise your family in this day and age. What? You don't have TV? What? You don't let your kids have their own computers? What? You don't, whatever paradigms we're raising our kids by might seem abnormal to society. Just persevere, push forward. It's difficult. It's very difficult to raise kids in a beautiful Islamic environment in this day and age, but we have to persevere with that. Right? So that's what Allah is telling us in this passage. So there we have, it's a very quick, super quick overview of Surah Al-Asr. I'm not qualified to give you this very deep tafsir of it, but I can certainly just give you an overview of the major themes here. One thing that I want to just remind all of you who are listening right now is that when we read things like Amilu Salihat, to do good deeds, it's very easy to read that and be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I love that. And then turn the page to the next surah, right? But remember, we're building on mastery here. This approach to understanding the Qur'an means that you have to internalize these verses before you're allowed to move on to the next verse. That's the way the companions internalized the Quran, studied the Quran. It was an active thing, right? The companions didn't have a book. There was no Quran that was written down. They were just hearing this recitation, internalizing in their hearts, because there was no, binder of surahs at that point in the early Meccan period. So to internalize it, you have to keep repeating it. But to really internalize it, you actually have to act on that thing. And I'm saying that to you right now because when we say those who believe and do good deeds, right, excel in righteous deeds, what does that mean? And that's our homework today. What does that mean? I want you to just really make a list. Like if you have a piece of paper in front of you, if you're doing that Quran journal, which I suggested you do, which will be really helpful. In this setup, and maybe I'll do a video just showing you how to set up a Quran journal or how I do it. I usually write the surah on the left side of the page. Like if I have a book that's opened up like a diary, and I'll write the surah major themes on the left side of the page, and the right side of the page I keep blank only for my own thoughts. And so if you were doing that, for example, in this scenario right here, you would on the left side of the page, you would write, maybe Surah Al-Asr, early Meccan, and then write whatever you want to write. Buy time, don't rush things, man's at a loss, make sure perseverance means to actively persevere, whatever notes that you want to take based on what you're listening to now or your own research. On the right side of the page, you really need to fill that with your own thoughts. And I would highly recommend for you, for those of you listening or listening with your families right now, to make a list with your family together of what do good deeds actually mean in my life, in the neighborhood that I live in the schools that we send our kids to your friends, your coworkers, and so forth. What are those good deeds actually? What are they, right? Because for those of you who in the corporate world or in the professional world or so forth, whenever you have a meeting, right, you have to actually come up with an action list. You can't just be like, oh, great meeting, Chuck, I'll get back to you on that one. And then no one follows up, right? Whenever you end a meeting, you have to kind of have action items and with boxes that you check off, and you better not come to the next meeting until you've checked off those boxes, because then it looks like you didn't do the work. And so here we have homework. And I think the homework for this exercise is to make that list of good deeds. Okay, what could those good deeds be? It could be, checking on your neighbor. This is the easiest one that none of us really do, is getting to know your neighbors next door. Sally, Chuck, Michelle, Mark and Lisa, whoever it is, Abdullah, whoever they are. Just get to know them. And when I say get to know your neighbors, don't get to know the Muslim neighbor who lives 2 miles down, who's the closest Muslim to you. Get to know your neighbors, the people who you share, your backyards with and so forth. Go out, get to know them, introduce yourself to them, and take them some cookies. That's a good deed, right? So start really small. Don't start huge, I have to save the world. Just start with okay, who lives around me geographically? Do I know all of these people? And then how do I get to know them and reach out to them? Okay, what's another good deed? So think about what can you do at work for people around you? For the students listening, is there anything that you can do for your fellow students or any of your students going through a difficult time? Are they away from home? They don't have family around and so forth. Because you would be surprised how much of these little deeds will have such a huge impact on the people around you. And you will be even more surprised about the impact that these good deeds have on you. So make that list if you can. And just really with your family, assign it out, delegate it out. Okay, you know what? Son 1, I want you to go do this. While he's doing that, son 2, you have to go do this good deed. Mom, I want you to do this. Dad, you have to do this. Whatever your structure is, and go out and do the homework. Because we as a team are not going to grow with this Qur'an if we're not doing it the way the companions did it. It's not an academic exercise, it's a transformational exercise. So please, 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 when this episode is over and I sign off, don't just be like, oh, great episode. Go do some homework for me. And I'm going to ask you in the next episode what homework you did. I would love for you to share in the comments below. Please, guys, leave me in the comments because I love reading what you guys have to say. What good deeds did you do? Can you share your ideas with other people? Because that's what this surah is about, right? About those who Remind each other. So you can remind each other in the comments and be these people that Allah is talking about in Surah Al-Asr, who remind each other through perseverance. You have to share your story. That's part of the sunnah. That's part of what Allah is telling us here. Share your story with other people. Not everything has to be a secret good act. Share your stories to remind each other and remind me of all the good things that we can do for our neighbors, the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community, for everybody, for humanity at large. Let's start being the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, I'm going to end my khutbah with on that line here. Thanks for sticking around with me in this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to check on you to make sure you guys did all the homework, and we are going to be jumping into the next surah, which is Surah Al-Adiyat, a very powerful, striking surah. I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون أولئك أصحاب الجنة خالدين فيها جزاء بما كانوا يعملون